Visiting an event as a photographer is always an exciting experience as we know there will likely be many photo opportunities and it's a great excuse to use our cameras in a new setting. It can feel really overwhelming though when there are so many people, food trucks, performers, live music, and everything is bustling. It can be hard to create well composed images whilst still capturing the moment. I recently had this experience at a classic car festival, and I made notes of the techniques I applied to maintain my style, be intentional with my compositions, and walk away with a new set of images that I am pretty stoked on. If busy places and events aren't your thing as a photographer, don't worry. These techniques can be applied in pretty much any shooting situation. So let's get into them. So I am a fan of a tight crop. That is no secret if you have been following me for a while. And this isn't just an aesthetic choice. Sometimes it's out of necessity, and sometimes it's just because I don't want something in the frame, and that's the easiest way to make that happen. I find a tighter crop can compositionally look a lot more interesting as it creates this kind of abstract appeal and intrigue of not really knowing what the subject is or what the photo is of. And that makes the viewer look at it a second or a third time trying to figure it out. Now, it's no new thing to be taking tight cropped photos of classic cars on film, and I am well aware of that. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't fun and that they don't look good. I was trying to work with a lot of reflections here in the cars, like people and buildings and things like that reflecting off. So being able to lean into this tight composition and really change up my compositions in general really helped to get the actual crop that I wanted. I also find when you get to a busy event or a festival or anything like that as a photographer, you take a look at it and you're just like really overwhelmed. You're thinking, oh my God, there's all this stuff that I want and need to capture, and you just don't really know where to start. I think leaning into the tight crop or the get closer kind of technique is really helpful here as you can kind of chunk things out and make this sort of shot list in your head. You can break things down and look at one scene and assess that and find 3 or 4 compositions even in that one scene, as opposed to just the one that you might have just grabbed from afar. I think it's also easier to create a theme or a pattern when you isolate certain things like this in your photography. And you'll find that when you go back and look at those shots, things will pop up and you'll notice that there's a theme there. Working this way with some kind of formula or constraint reminds me of when people implement rhyming to poetry or songwriting to kind of give them a guide and something to work from. So get in nice and close next time you are out shooting, whether that's yourself physically with your camera or your focal length. Speaking of, let's talk about gear for just a second. So I shot all of the photos that you're seeing here with my OM10 and my Zuiko 1.4 50mm lens, which is super beautiful. Zuiko is the GOAT if you haven't heard. This choice was based mostly off the fact that I shot this same setup last year at this same festival with this same film, CineStill 400D, and it ended up being quite a big role for me. One of the photos from this role landed me in my first exhibition, and that led to more opportunities that I go through in a different video. I also ended up doing a reel with CineStill for their snapshot series, which felt really cool as a film photographer. And probably the best thing of all, I had the biggest success selling prints as a photographer, which is the dream. And these images just sold so well and people loved them so much. So safe to say I was pretty keen to get back to this car festival and create that same success, hopefully. So like I said, I used a 50mm lens, and I think that's a great all-rounder in general. And for this event, it was really great, no complaints at all. But judging by the photos I got back this year, I think next year I will take like an 85 or a 90mm lens and like really super lean into the tight crop thing. This is a focal length that I don't think a lot of people initially kind of think of, but I think it's a lot more versatile than you would initially think, and it's definitely worth trying if you can get your hands on one. I am not opposed to a zoom lens either. I often shoot zoom lenses, especially if it's like full sun and above f8. I don't really think that the zoom kind of decreases the image quality that much if you're using it in that kind of sense. At least that's what I've seen from my photography. Long focal lengths give a shallower depth of field as well. And I think that bokeh is a great way to kind of just eliminate busyness in a scene that you can't crop out of your composition. I think that's a useful application of bokeh rather than just like doing it for the sake of it in your photo to kind of like show off your gear. I feel with wide angle lenses that probably would be a pick for some people at something like this. You're just getting so much in the scene, and just me personally, I don't like that. I want to break things down in this way that I was talking about. And I just think after a couple of shots of everything being in the scene and showing everyone everything, it's kind of like, okay, we get it. Can we see something else? But maybe you're like, I'm so over these tight crops of these cars. Show me something else, because that's also valid. At the festival, we ran into one of our photo friends, Matthew, not Matt Loves Cameras, different Matt. And he was using his X Pro 1 and he had the 35mm lens on it. And he was having like an okay time, and then he switched to the 56mm and he was loving it a lot more. So I think that kind of like ties in with what I was saying. Hey, Matt. So I don't normally shoot people or want people in my photos. In fact, I'm always waiting for them to kind of like walk out of the frame. But something changed this year. And at this festival, I felt really drawn to the people at this festival and I wanted to shoot them. Not like, that sounds really bad. This is having a really bad time. Okay. I had a little think about why this is. And I think because I've been in front of the camera a little bit more for work stuff. And I've also been shooting like, you know, fashion and restaurants. So that's involved some people. I think that's really kind of like gotten me just excited to include people and include some kind of human element in the photo. One of the main reasons that I have shied away from shooting people is because you can't control them, especially in a setting like this, like you can the cars or the shopping trolleys or the buildings that are just static things there that I can take as long as I want to shoot, and they're basically going to stay the same. People are unpredictable and it creates anxiety for me because I think like, will this whole shot be ruined because like someone's eye was like this, or like they were pulling like a weird face, or like someone's hand was in, you know, and I just think like, I don't want to waste film on taking that chance and then someone has like ruined the photo. How dare they? So this year I decided to combat that by kind of shooting people from behind, which again isn't anything new, and also just sort of missing out their faces in general. And it's something that I've been doing when I've been shooting for work as well, because I noticed that the hit rate was a lot higher that way because you're missing out that kind of opportunity for someone to kind of like pull the face or do whatever. So I took the approach of like kind of, yeah, standing behind people and sneakily kind of taking shots of them in this kind of street photography-ish style, which is also another thing that I don't really like to do or want to do, but maybe I do. I don't know. I'm so Caleb right now. So I used the people to kind of find compositions, and I used them in the frame the same way I would the cars or any of the other sort of objects that I shoot. And I think this created a really interesting result, and it was a nice departure from the year before where I had just pretty much only shot the cars. I'm a big fan of these unconventional crops where, like I said, I have missed out people's head completely, or I've just gone for like the lower half of their body to focus in on a certain color of something that they were wearing, or like the bag that they were holding, all those kind of things, and just creating these like faceless objects that are kind of similar to what I would normally shoot, but it's giving a little bit more context to the event because you can see the types of people that were there. So I think using the tight crop thing I was talking about before and unconventional crops, things that you wouldn't normally think to do, or you would think like, oh, that's wrong, I don't want to like cut that off there, I would go for it because I think it makes things look interesting. So I now have quite an extensive collection of cars that are shot on CineStill 400D, and that's something that I plan to keep adding to. I love when photo projects like this kind of just organically pop up and there's no real end to them. You can just keep on going. So if you like this series and you find it interesting, definitely hit the link that I have pinned to the comments section and you can see all of them on my print shop. This includes this year's and also last year's. And of course, they are all available for sale as well. I really appreciate anybody who buys a print. It helps to support the channel and you get something awesome in return as well. So at the festival, I noticed a lot of photographers, both professional and amateur. I hate saying that. Hobbyist, let's say hobbyist. And they all had kind of what looked like wider angle lenses and they were all standing back, like very far back to grab the whole entire scene. And I mean, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you need that, especially if you're documenting something for like media purposes. But I just think after a while, it's kind of a little bit like, okay, we can see what's going on. We know what the festival is, but it's nice to really get in there and really see what's going on like a smaller scale. I think this can be done really well by getting into the action. So this applies for like live music crowds and all those kind of things as well. I think getting in amongst it and showing people the whatever it is from the point of a patron, someone who is going there and their perspective rather than like the photographer that's been hired to shoot it, if that makes sense. So you really want to put people in the scene rather than just like looking at the scene and what's going on and being a spectator. You want to like really get in there. I did this at the dance floor when I was shooting people. I thought it was a really opportune moment to like get in there and people are kind of like off guard as well because they're enjoying things and you can really take advantage of that as a photographer. I think documenting things from like your perspective and how you would move through an event like this is going to be way more immersive for the viewer, for the person that's looking at the photos, rather than just taking this kind of like stock standard like documentary, standing back, viewing something, take on things. In my recent newsletter, I interviewed Sophia Carrie, who is a portrait photographer, but she's been doing a lot of like live music photography lately. And she's been getting some really awesome shots that are just like full of energy. There's one in particular that I'm thinking of, and I will link my newsletter below if you want to go check out that interview with her. But she talks about really, getting into the crowd and getting those kind of shots where you are going to get like a moment that you're not going to get if you're like standing back and you're being shy. I think when people are at an event, they are more likely to want to have their photo taken or be okay with it or be used to cameras kind of around. So this for me was a really great way to kind of like test out doing a more sort of street photography style thing. And I think this is a great place to start for somebody who is a little bit nervous, just like photographing strangers in more sort of like desolate places or going up to someone and asking them for their portrait. I saw a lot of like girls dressed up in like rockabilly outfits, like really wanting their photo taken. So anything like this that's happening in your area, I would definitely grab that opportunity with both hands to kind of like break you in for it. I'm really happy with the shots that I got, and I have also added a few new ones to my print shop that I shot at a different car festival a few days later that just happened to be on, and I wanted to finish off my roll of film. So go check those out. There is a comment in the description and it's also pinned and you can see the full gallery over there. If you want to hear about more of my adventures with CineStill 400D, then I will link the video just here so you can go over and watch what happened last year.